All right. Mic working? Slides working? Hi. I am Nicole Benett, and I'm a lead service designer with Laerdal Medical. And Laerdal is a global health and tech simulation company with an ambitious impact goal. I'm grateful to work at a place dedicated to making an impact, and really grateful to be here to talk to you all today. And I'm here to discuss logic models and how they can be a powerful tool for driving impact. But before diving into logic models, I want to share a story about something illogical. And this story has to do with my dad. So, my dad is a retired experimental psychologist and entrepreneur who worked with surgery patients and anesthesiologists. And in the 80s and 90s, he worked on the challenge of patients waking up during surgery and experiencing pain. To solve this, he created something called the face machine. And the face machine was designed to monitor microfacial grimaces to detect if patients were experiencing pain and to help anesthesiologists adjust drug levels. And I grew up hearing about the face machine a lot at the dinner table. It was both a source of great excitement and also quite painful because it lasted a long time. And my dad didn't use a logic model, but if he did, it might have looked something like this, where you have the activities, putting on nodes on the face to monitor microfacial grimaces, outputs, the number of microgrimaces contracted during surgery, which could lead to a short-term outcome of the improved ability of anesthesiologists to monitor pain. And his team assumed that if the face machine could detect pain through facial grimaces, anesthesiologists could adjust the level of drugs and help people not experience pain during surgery. However, I'm going to cut to the chase and say that the face machine failed. And it failed for a critical reason. There was no connection between facial grimaces and the ability of anesthesiologists to monitor pain. Years later, a study that he was involved in showed that grimacing was random. Men actually had more microgrimaces, like 80% microgrimaces, more than women, and there was no link to pain and waking up or post-op recovery. Maybe if he had used a logic model earlier on, things would have been different, both for the project and my family. And so let's talk about logic models and how they can be a tool for you to use in your own practice. They're simple, yet powerful. And they've also been around for a really long time. A logic model is a visual diagram or artifact that outlines the connections between inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and the ultimate impact of a service or program. And as David mentioned, before joining Laerdal, I worked in public health and government and the social sector, where logic models are as common as Post-it notes and journey maps are for designers. But I feel like they haven't really fully made their way into our service design profession, and I found them to be very helpful, and you might as well. So let's break down the different components. We have inputs, the resources that you need for a program or service. Funding, staff, materials, equipment, right? This then leads to activities, your core offerings of a program or service. And then this leads to the outputs, the direct deliverables that come out of your activities. And this can be your intended plans, the things that you're planning to do. And you also have on the right-hand side of the logic model, your short-term outcomes, or the changes that you can expect that come out of your intended plans. Then you have your medium-term outcomes, or the things that are changing after your short-term outcomes. And then you have that ultimate long-term impact, right? The broader sustained effects of a service or program. And these are your intended results. So another part of logic models are assumptions, and we love assumptions in design. We often use desirability, feasibility, and viability in our practice, which is great. But logic models can be another way to derive assumptions in your program or service. In addition to assumptions, there are external factors, the things that are not directly part of your service or program, but can have a huge impact on them, like geopolitics or the weather. So I want to put this all together and work through an example. I picked something that I thought we could all get behind and could be universal. And in the spirit of Lairdall's commitment to simulation, I've developed the simulated scenario. And I'd like to introduce you to Compost Champions. So Compost Champions is a hypothetical citywide service that transforms food waste into decreases methane emissions, and this is based off of a real service, but it is hypothetical. So in my home state of DC, we actually have this pilot program. So I drew some inspiration. All right, so we're gonna walk through what it could look like. And ideally, I would do this as part of a team, but I'm gonna kind of like make this up, and you'll hear me refer to some colleagues like Larry and Miranda, and just sort of bear with me. And also pay close attention, because after I explain this, I have a challenge for you. All right, so we're gonna pretend like we're in a huddle and we're making this logic model about Compost Champions. All right, so the city has given us resources to make Compost Champions a real thing, and we know that composting reduces methane emissions. This is so great. We also know that reduced methane emissions leads to reduced global warming. Okay, and so now, I'm so glad we're here. Let's just outline what this could look like. And, I think, Larry, Miranda, let's start with the activities. What are the activities that we might have out of this Compost Champion programs? All right, okay, so I'm hearing enrollment, that we're gonna need people to enroll in the program and get households there. Also, we're gonna need to distribute supplies for composting as our activities. And yeah, one activity is also gonna be composting, the food waste, actually doing that. We're also gonna need to collect and process all of that compost. And then there's gonna be some awareness and education. Yeah, this sounds really good. All right, let's think about what are the resources that we need for this. Okay, supplies, yes, Miranda, that's great. Let's dig a little bit deeper into it. What else? Okay, yeah, bins and bags. Additionally, we're gonna need those residents to do the composting. Larry, great, yes, staff and truck drivers, and we're gonna need that as well. We're also gonna need that funding, and so, that's gonna be a big part. Thank God the city has already green-lighted this. We're gonna need that space to compost, the IT and web and print and support systems. Yes, those are all really great inputs. All right, let's think about those outputs, those things that are immediately gonna come out of this composting service. So yeah, supplies distributed, the households enrolled, we can anticipate that's gonna come out. And then the volume of food waste and compost collected, yeah, that's gonna come out of our activities. Now, what are some of those short-term, let's say 6-month changes we can expect to see? Okay, yeah, like a decrease of that food waste in the trash and landfill. Yeah, we can expect that decrease, hopefully. But we're also gonna expect the increase of knowledge on how to compost among participants. And then we're also gonna increase the ability to compost. Yeah, I think we can expect that, hopefully. And then with the medium-term outcomes, what might we expect sort of in the middle after this? Okay, yeah, like Larry, yes, we're gonna expect that increase of an organic matter decomposing in a compost heap. We should be able to expect that. Oh, amazing. Okay, thank you, Larry and Miranda. Let's continue this. So we need to figure out the assumption. So Larry, what do you think? Miranda, what do you think? So yeah, we do need those willing residents, right? We really need that. And yep, we need that space, and that's a big assumption. Do we have that? Let's double check before we really roll this out. And then we're definitely gonna need that funding. So these are critical assumptions. And let's think about those external factors. So the regulatory environment. Oh my God, you're so right, Miranda. Rodent activity is huge. We might want to factor that in here. And then, yeah, we just had some neighbors experience Helene, and that has a huge impact on the ability of this service to be successful. So extreme weather is definitely going to be an external factor. All right, I'm going to come out of this little role play here and show you what a full logic model put together might look like. So we went through all these components of our compost champions fictitious service, and this is what it might look like. So, like I said, I hope you were paying attention because I have a little test for you. So, what I'd like you to do is take a moment to think about what could be an output and what could be a short-term outcome. I told you what they were before, and now it's a chance for you to think. This is often the hardest part of a logic model, and people get outputs and outcomes confused all the time. So for the outputs, go ahead and think, what are some of those direct deliverables that you can expect to come out of this service, out of the activities? So take a moment to think. And then similarly, take a moment to think about what could be some short-term outcomes. So the changes that you expect to see. Take a moment to think. And if you are online, feel free to drop your answers into the chat box and just label them outputs and then outcomes. All right. So I'd like to do a reveal. We've got outputs here. So we have the supplies distributed, household enrolled, volume of food waste. Now, raise your hand if you put any one of the outputs in the right place. Just raise your hand if you kind of got it. Okay, in your own thinking or writing. All right, cool, great. And then here are the outcomes. Decrease in food waste, in the trash and landfill, increased knowledge, right? So you can read through these. And go ahead and raise your hand if you put any of these in the right place, if you were able to kind of get it. Okay. All right, and now raise your hand if you thought this was confusing. Okay, cool. Oh, not too bad. And I'm pretty impressed because this is one of the hardest parts. And the main difference is that in the outcomes, you can expect a change. And there will be a direction of change. Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? Is it improving? And so there's always gonna be a direction of change in the outcomes. So now that we have the basics of logic models, I want to talk about measurement and evaluation. So logic models are often the foundation for measurement. In fact, they were originally designed in the 1960s for the evaluation sciences. And when it comes to evaluation, there are entire careers and books and programs dedicated to it. But one could simplify it, and I don't mean to do this to be reductionist, but you could simplify it into an implementation evaluation where you're looking at what was implemented and sort of that first part of the logic model, and an impact evaluation. Okay? And so implementation questions would focus on, are we implementing the service as we intended, right? Whereas an impact evaluation might be something like, to what extent are we making the outcomes we were planning on making? And these two things often relate together. Coming back to our Compost Champions program, for example, if we didn't get those supplies to the residents, that's definitely going to impact our outcomes, right? So these two things work hand in hand. And measures and indicators can be woven throughout the entire logic model. They can be in any part of the logic model. And so, for example, you could have a measure about your activities, your outputs, inputs, or any of your outcomes. So coming back to our Compost Champions scenario, I want to work through a short example of how you might do this. And so let's say that me and Larry and Miranda and other stakeholders, because this is definitely a team, would need to be a team effort, have prioritized that we really want to understand the decrease of food waste in the trash or landfill, right? This is what we've aligned on. So we're gonna use our design skills of diverging and converging, and we're gonna come up with different possible ways to measure this. So maybe it's the amount of food waste in the actual landfill. Maybe, but you know what? That doesn't really get at the change. So could it be the change in the amount of food waste over the last 6 months? Maybe. We'd have to take like samples, logistics, that could be hard, but possible. Could it also be instead the use of trash versus compost for food scraps among participants? Yeah, maybe, but also not really getting at that change. So what about the change in using the trash or the compost for food scraps over the 6 months? And yeah, we could probably measure that. It would be a proxy measure, maybe with a survey, but we could probably measure that. So let's go with that one, all right? So that's one way to use logic models to derive some measures and assess impact. All right, we have gone through the basics of logic models, how to create them using Compost Champions as an example, and how to use them a little bit for evaluation and measurement. What I'd like to do now is share some real-life examples. And at Laerdal, we have lots of different tools that we use, of course, and logic models is just one of them, but I want to share 2 examples with you from Laerdal. So this past Monday, actually, we launched something called MentorLink in the company. It's a pilot program initially intended for designers and with potential to scale company-wide. And the idea is that MentorLink will connect mentees and mentors with complementary passions to foster growth and learning and development. And to help make this concept of MentorLink more tangible, I collaborated with a colleague in HR to create a logic model. Now, this is a total work in progress, messy draft, and I wanted to show it to you all today to just show how easy it could be to create it. So I'm not expecting you to read any of this, but I want to share that this model really helped us show the low resource, high impact potential. It allowed me to get quick feedback. I used it as a prototype very rapidly. And it also allowed us to secure additional buy-in from executive leadership, which, funny enough, was also an input that we had. So, example number 1. Example number 2 comes from a program with our global health organization that has done in partnership with Japaigo and many others, called Helping Mothers and Babies Survive. And the program is a suite of facility and simulation-based learning designed to improve and sustain the life-saving skills of health professionals during and immediately after birth. And I want to share this logic model with you all for a part of this program because it includes the measures, like I mentioned, right on the logic model. And you can see how some of the inputs that are there, like number of facilities who receive training or number of drills completed, could connect to the case fatality rates, right? And I'm happy to share that remarkably, this program has served as a foundation for contributing to a 70% reduction in maternal mortality in Tanzania. So pretty impressive. My hope is that you see logic models as a tool that you can use in your own service design practice. As we've discussed, they can help you structure your thinking, plan, align teams and stakeholders, co-create, outline a pathway to impact, evaluate, and test your basic assumptions and establish metrics. But a tool is just a tool, and there are some downsides. It can be oversimplified. You might have to, it's very linear, and it's really important to ensure co-creation and iteration and revisit those basic assumptions. And even with this might be illogical, and we probably want to test this as well, but I might dare to say that if you use a logic model in your service design practice, maybe you'll see an increase in the likelihood of making an impact. And so with that, you have heard that I've worked with evaluation and measures for a long time, so I couldn't dare leave this stage without an opportunity to ask for a little bit of feedback. So I invite you to complete this quick feedback survey. And if you'd like, you can express your interest in getting access to a logic model canvas. We're designers, so it's canvases, not templates. And I'd be happy to send that to you probably next week. And so I'd love to stay in touch, hear your thoughts. We're committed to building a strong service design practice at Laerdal and beyond. And thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Okay, so we're going to start with questions in the room. Because we're running a few minutes behind schedule, there's some technical difficulties with Ring Central. It kicks us out of the event at the proposed end time, so we can't get to those questions. We're working on a solution for that. So does anybody in the room have some questions? Let me get you on mic so that our participants can hear.
Hi, thanks for the speech. So I have a quick question on, you kind of mentioned it towards the end, but what would be your opinion on when exactly in a process to use this framework? It sounds like, to my opinion, that it's more early stages, but where does it fit in the amount of maps and process maps and all these kind of things, basically?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, and that was in some ways not like my backup question, but I was like, this is a question I get a lot, and so thank you for asking that. And I hate this answer, but it depends. When I was in public health school, like over a decade ago, you would go right into, in some ways, like making a logic model without doing any of the design work. And so it was this like, oh my gosh, what? We're just gonna build this without doing the design work of like, what is the service, right? And so I actually think that in some ways, it's originally later, where it's like once you have a service concept, it helps you outline what it is to see the impact. But as I have stepped into the design world, I really like to use it early and use it almost as a prototype in and of itself. And so it kind of depends. And I think it can be used in lots of different places, but just like we're not going to use a journey map all the time or a persona all the time. Yeah, it's important to know when, but I do think it could be early and it could be later. Yeah.
Thank you for the speech. I'm wondering what happens if your assumptions are totally wrong. Are you check it? Thank you.
Like my dad. And the face machine, exactly. I mean, I think that is a question for all of us all the time. Like what happens when our assumptions are wrong? Things fail often, right? Or more significantly, they can cause harm. And so I think that coming back to the benefits of the logic model, it can help you see the assumptions more clearly and then help you test them. And so it's a tool for that. But you know, lots of things can happen when the assumptions are wrong. It can also then be an opportunity to iterate and revise your assumptions and your model, right? So if like, oh, wait, this isn't leading to a decrease in food ending up in the trash. Well, why? Why not? And then that could invite more qualitative research and design research. And so I think it's a chance to iterate, check those things, and find out maybe why.
Hi, thank you for the talk. So you mentioned, having some kind of participatory element to creating these. So imagining a Venn diagram, one of the circles are participants in this process. The other circle are the audience that would be consuming this. Can you tell me a little bit about who you think of being in the middle of that, and if there are any that are exclusive to either side of the Venn diagram?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question. I think that is sometimes one of the downfalls. A lot of times, it could be, again, this comes from historically the evaluation sciences. So it could be like a researcher or evaluator sitting there and creating this with the people who designed the program or the service. But then to go a step further, that this isn't just, something to make without others. And so I think that it can lend itself to not being participatory. But I think bringing it closer to actually designing and using it as a co-creative prototype can be really powerful. But I think sort of historically it hasn't been, which is why I'm excited for like all designers to know about it and bring those co-creative participatory methods. I think if an evaluator is using, participatory evaluation, they might be more attuned to working directly with, beneficiaries and program participants and things of that nature. But I don't know if that helps answer.
Okay, so fortunately we are out of time. For anyone else who has questions, and for those virtually who did not get a chance for their questions to be asked, you can message Nicole directly through Ring Central, and
Yep.
she'll have the opportunity to get back to you. For those of you here in person, you can, ambush her or something, but not during lunch, maybe. But thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you.